Hey everyone, welcome to Friday Q&A number 13. Before we get into the questions, as always, if you have questions for next week, get them in the comments below or write to me on Facebook. I always appreciate the vast range of input that you guys have. And furthermore, I literally just clicked over 10,000 subscribers on this channel. So to everybody who continues to watch the videos, thank you so much. To all you people who have been here from the very start, mega thanks to you. Thanks so much for sharing my content and suggesting it. And it really does mean a lot to me. I'm a guy literally sitting in a little bedroom making content, and it's going out to people all around the world, which is super cool. If you want to support the channel, I don't sell presets, I don't have a Patreon or anything like that, but you can go and listen to my music, Ragdoll, yeah, that's me on there. Where am I? There, that's apparently me. And we have a Bandcamp page, ragdollrock.bandcamp.com. You can buy merchandise and you can buy our music. You can stream our music everywhere. You can watch it on YouTube. And yeah, tell your friends about it, because if you like hard rock music and metal music, I'm sure you'll find something that you like in the band. And that always means the most to me. I love making these videos and I love guitar gear and I love teaching guitar. But I'm a musician at heart and I love to write music and I love to play guitar in my band. So when you guys go and check it out, and if you happen to like it and you let me know, it really does mean a lot to me. Going forward, let's answer some questions for this week. What are my thoughts on flying Vs? You can't find any on my wall. I do have an Epi V lying around somewhere in storage, and I used to play it a lot when I was a teenager because I loved Michael Schenker. I still love Michael Schenker, and I just thought, he's good at guitar and he has a V, so I should probably play a V. And just check out this photo and you'll know why I love flying Vs. I think that's when I was like 16 or 17, so that guitar's laying around somewhere. I need to get it out and set it up. I also really want to get a Momose Flying V. I mentioned Deviser Guitars earlier. Momose is one of the brands that they make, and when I did the factory tour earlier this year, they were making a batch of Flying Vs, and my lord, they are beautiful. So maybe at some point I'll get a really sweet V from them. So in a previous video, I mentioned that I use my Mesa Rectifier primarily to record the last Ragdoll album, and why didn't I use the Axe-Fx to do that? Well, the simple answer is I didn't own an Axe-Fx when we did it. When we did that album, for me it was sort of like the culmination of a couple of years' work in terms of really figuring out what we wanted the band to sound like, what sort of music we wanted to write, and I think we really came into our own, developed our own character on that album. And a big part of that was I really got into the drop tune stuff and the thick rectifier kind of tones and really layering guitars. And I bought a Rev G after borrowing a Roadster. So we did one song with a Roadster, I liked it so much, and I went and bought a Rev G, used it all over the album, and it's great. And then when we went to tour that in 2016, we did the USA, we did Europe, and we did an Australian tour, all in the space of 3 or 4 months. And relying on backline in that situation was not something that I wanted to do, so I wanted to be able to take those tones on the road with me, and the easiest way to do that was to get an Axe-Fx. I bought an Axe-Fx Ultra, thinking I'll just use it as my touring rig, and it just absolutely blew me away, and that started my whole journey with the Fractal stuff. And now I'm using the Axe-Fx 3 to record our new album. Here's a snippet of what it sounds like, unmixed, unedited. This one's not really a question, but a comment. Essentially, my reading of the comment is that you can either go out when you're trying to write music, this was a question that came up last week, should you try to be as ambitious as possible, or should you just try to do something kind of stock? I believe this comment is sort of saying, take the middle ground. Like, if you're into a band like AC/DC, why not write some material which kind of sounds like AC/DC and do some covers, and then that way you can ease your audience into it. And I've got some direct experience with that. We've been doing Ragdoll since 2009 now, so coming up to 9 years, and we've done a lot of country shows here in regional Western Australia. Keep in mind, Western Australia is 5 times bigger than Texas, so it's a pretty big place. There's a lot of different places to play. And the scene there is you can't just go and do your own original music. You have to fill out 3 hours in a night. So we played a lot of AC/DC, a lot of Creedence, Guns N' Roses, all that kind of delicious classic rock stuff. And we started to pepper our own songs in there. And there's no way that you're going to get the same response playing an original song that no one's ever heard before straight after Highway to Hell. But what we figured out was that you know, people are genuinely hungry for new music, and if they like the cover songs that you're doing in that setting, that they would definitely get into the original thing. So we started selling CDs at shows and t-shirts, and it goes a long way to help build an audience. So that's definitely one way to do it. In Australia, especially Western Australia, it's probably the only way to do it unless you're incredibly lucky. In the United States, so anytime we've toured over there, it's been strictly original. We don't do covers. We might do like one cover per set, like, you know, a Dio song or something like that, just something fun. But there's far more of a scene in the States and Europe for just getting in a van, playing your original music that no one's ever heard before and absolutely slugging it. But I guess the model that we used, which has been successful for us, is, we love classic rock, we love classic heavy metal, we love a lot of modern stuff as well. So if we do get booked to do these shows where we have to play for hours a night, we'll do a combination of covers and our own music. I think it works pretty well. What you really need is a tube amp, something like a torpedo captor and some good IRs. Yeah, that's one way to get a guitar sound. As I've said before, there are so many different ways to get a guitar sound nowadays that there is no right or wrong way to do it. Use whatever works, use whatever gets you closer to making music. Who cares about what type of valve or what type of Tolex you have on your amp or whether it's a plug-in? If it sounds good, it is good. Any experience with the FGN guitars from Japan? I have absolutely no experience. I didn't notice any when I was over there, but that's probably because I wasn't looking. I did a quick little Google search and their stuff looks really good. So yeah, why don't you buy that guitar that you think you're doing it? Go on, do it. Buy the guitar, do it. And then tell us all about it. This is a good one. How do you make a living doing music? Pretty much you don't. Yeah, that's the short answer. What you have to do in order to make a living playing music is not be fussy, because for me, I've been teaching guitar since I was about 15. So when I was, through high school and through university, that was essentially my form of sort of passive income, and I've developed that into something where I more or less teach, 20, 25 hours a week now, and that's my main source of income. And then I freelance as well, so I will basically do any gig that I can do. If somebody gets on the phone and says, hey Leon, can you come and do this show? It's playing whatever style of music in whatever format, whether it's like, a death metal gig, or it's an acoustic duo with looping, or it's a funk gig, or it's a hard rock gig. I'll just go and do it if I have the time to do it. And that's the way I guess I supplement my income. Basically, royalties from original music, absolutely not even worth talking about. I think my last royalty check was a couple of bucks, and in Perth that barely buys you a cup of coffee. YouTube has been pretty good. I make way more money through YouTube than I do through like music royalties at the moment anyway, and I don't make a lot of money through YouTube either, through the ads, but that's decent. That buys me like a cup of coffee a day, or dinner with my wife once a week. So that's kind of the way I approach it. Obviously she works as well, and yeah, you just kind of got to do anything that you can, anything and everything. And the last year I've been really, really lucky. I've worked on some great projects with some amazing musicians, and just been lucky to sort of experience the whole breadth of the industry, whether it's like co-producing stuff, writing stuff, playing gigs, doing the corporate thing, doing the covers thing, doing the original thing. Yeah, it's a lot of work, but it's way more fun than working in an office, because at the end of the day, I'm picking up my guitar and I'm playing, and ultimately I'm playing with good people as well, which is the thing that makes it really tolerable. So it is difficult, and it's not for everyone, and it's barely scraping by a lot of the time, but I wouldn't trade it. Studio monitors versus FR for home practice. Obviously you can see behind me I've got my Adams in here. I'm a big fan of studio monitors because not only can you use them with your guitar modeler or your tube amp and load box or whatever you want to do, but you can just listen to music through them. And it changes the way you experience music, because you can hear so much more detail and, listen to a mix the way it was intended to be listened to, and not like colored by like a giant sub in a car or through tiny little iPod speakers. So I'm a big fan of studio monitors in that setting. If you really want punch and volume though, get something like a CLR or a Zytone or anything like that, just so you can crank it up. Otherwise, studio monitors, man, all the way. Even these Atoms, they get pretty darn loud and they can really push some air, which I really like. And I don't do it too much because I do spend a lot of time in here. I don't want to damage my hearing, but when I do, it always impresses me. This is a great question. If I could only use pedals and an amp, what would my pedal board have on it? Essentially, this is what I did for years, and I'll show you the components of my old rig. I did a video not too long ago where I fired up my old dual amp rig, which you can go and listen to. It sounds pretty savage, but I'll just walk you through a couple of pedals that I consider essential. I mainly use them in the studio now because obviously the AX8 does it all live. But yeah, let's have a look at those. Alright, let's talk about some pedals that I would put on an analog pedal board. Let's start with this one. I used this one in my last amp and pedal board rig before I went digital. It's an Eventide H9. Essentially, this is like the Swiss Army knife of guitar pedals. I used it a lot for the Leslie sound, and there's a preset in here, if I can remember how to get to it, yep, which was just my main lead delay, and then I had a rhythmic delay, and kind of like a wider panning delay in there for different solo sounds. I really like the chorus sound in there, and I had this sound which is based on the undulator algorithm, which is all over Ragdoll's Back to Zero album. The actual track Back to Zero is heaps of this patch and heaps of the shimmer patch combined, and we wrote that song in like an afternoon, very much inspired by this pedal. My favorite pedal of all time, favorite overdrive pedal, obviously, is this Anarchy Audio Workhorse. It's based on a clon, but you just plug this into anything and it gives you more of what you like. So I would always set up an amp, whether it was my DSL or my Mesa or whatever else I was using at the time, so that I could have a really chunky rhythm sound with everything on my guitar all the way up, and then I would kick this on for a solo sound. And it's probably the only overdrive pedal that I own that doesn't like mess with the fundamental sound of the guitar too much. It just gives you more of what you like. So it's a really, really glorious pedal. And then I would use either a volume pedal or, you know, my volume control on my guitar just to sort of turn that down. The brand new pedal that I just got is this Red Panda Context, which does a pretty awesome gated reverb. Haven't had a chance to do a demo with it yet, but it will be coming in the next week. Beautiful room. All the sounds on this are really, really great. It also doubles up as a delay. So this kind of thing would be really, really handy. Less so for like the Ragdoll thing where I could just get by with these two pedals and a wah, which I'll show you the wah in a second. This would be more an all-purpose kind of thing, and it's a pretty inspiring sound. I really like it. I haven't had a huge amount of time to play with it, but I definitely will. So that would probably make it on the board, even just to sort of thicken up like cleanish rhythm tones. And then for wah pedals, let me get this down on the shelf, if I can do that without breaking stuff, is this guy. This is my favorite wah ever. This is the Buddha, if you can see that in there, the Buddha Budwa or Budwa, however you say it. I need to do a demo with this thing because it just sounds great. It's like my perfect wah. Much prefer it over the stock Crybaby. And again, basically any wah sounds that you hear on the last couple of Ragdoll albums are this thing. I got one when we did the little EP called Here Today, and we plugged it in and it changed the way I played guitar. So it's just an awesome sounding little pedal. So that, and then probably something like a Polytune, and that would be my pedal board. With a MIDI switcher or something, I could do like every sound that I need. But, you know, we got this bad boy in the house and the AX8, so that kind of stuff's a little bit redundant for me. But it is all inspiring in terms of just, I plug them in and they sound good, so that's why I keep it all. What advice would I have for a rhythm player looking into getting into leads? Well, if you're a decent rhythm player, that's probably what you're going to be doing 90% of the time. I think it was Gary Moore who said something along the lines of like, you know, guitar players spend 90% of the time practicing lead, but 90% of the time actually playing rhythm at a gig. So my advice would be, if you're not already acquainted with the basics of like the pentatonic scale and the major scale and the minor scale, get those under your fingers, and then just go and learn some of your favorite solos. You know, I think one of my favorite guitar solos is the solo in Nothing Else Matters, and James Hetfield plays it, and it's gorgeous and melodic, and you know, he's such an amazing guitar player in general. He's known as a really great rhythm player, but you can hear in that solo just his attack that's coming from years and years of just getting great at down picking and his note choice. And yeah, I'm a really big fan of the way he approaches soloing, and I wish he did it more in that band. So yeah, be Hetfield, basically. You know, have all the rhythm stuff down super solid, and then just learn some melodic solos. And then if you can do that, and you can, you know, like pick 16th notes really fast, it's just a case of, if you want to do the Yngwie thing or the Paul Gilbert thing, it's pretty much the same as playing rhythm guitar to me anyway. It's all just sequences. So focus on the melodic aspects of it, and I'm sure you'll be able to grasp all the shred stuff if you're a decent rhythm player already. So I've got a few questions recently, either through my Facebook page or just like, you know, chatting to people, and everyone at the moment has a hot take on this, but what do I think about Greta Van Fleet? I hadn't heard of this band until about a year ago, and I listened to a little bit of it, and I have to say I really like that song, like Black Smoke Rising or something, mainly because it kind of sounds like an outtake from Rush's 2112 album, like obviously not the suite, but just the extra songs in there. So I was kind of like, this is kind of cool. You know, these guys have a bit of a Zeppelin vibe, and I can hear the Rush influence in there. And they've become everyone's favorite whipping boy recently. You know, there was that Pitchfork review where Pitchfork just absolutely savaged them. And I read that and I was like, well, maybe I'll go and listen to this album. And, you know, yeah, it is Led Zeppelin worship to the max. Like, there's no getting around it. That's like, that influence just outweighs everything else there. And, you know, so I read the Pitchfork review and I was like, well, I don't disagree with some of this, but at the same time, you know, Pitchfork give like a green light to bands who sound exactly like Nirvana, Bleach, you know, like just carbon copy. We're just going to do this sound, and we're going to wear flannel, and we're going to scream over like sort of punky, heavy guitars. Or they'll give a free pass to a band that sounds exactly like Talking Heads did in the early 80s. Or a free pass to a band that just kind of sounds like a Neil Young derivative. But it seems like if you want to imitate Led Zeppelin, then that's like the cardinal sin. So there's that aspect of it as well. I've really got no problem with this band. Like, I listened to their album, and I'll be the first to say it's not for me. Like, I didn't particularly like it. I probably won't listen to it again. It's just not for me. You know, there's a lot of other bands who do that style of music who I feel really do it well and with their own character. For example, Rival Sons or The Answer are two bands who they incorporate the Led Zeppelin influence, but it's like they're not trying to sound like a long-lost Led Zeppelin sound. They're more sort of taking the ethos of that band and the production approach and sort of the, what's the best way to put it? Like, yeah, they're actually being inspired by the approach there, not just going, hey, we love these songs so much that we're just going to literally remix them, or, you know, essentially remix them or rework them. So I guess that's my main criticism of that band and why it just did nothing for me. But at the same time, there's so many bands that do absolutely nothing for me. However, obviously their management's doing something right because they're playing all these huge gigs and people are talking about them. So I guess that's a positive thing. And everybody always goes on about the thing where it's like, well, maybe it's inspiring young kids to pick up instruments. But at the same time, those same musicians will, like, you know, rip into somebody like Taylor Swift as well and be like, oh, all pop music is garbage and it's a decline of Western civilization. Whereas, you know, I know someone did a video, wrote an article like, you know, Taylor Swift is this generation's guitar hero, but there's that element there as well. But ultimately, if you're looking to like the mainstream music industry at the moment for your source of what's the next big thing, I think that's kind of misguided because the industry, it's not functional at the moment because of all the disruption that has happened. And all the disruption has happened from sources outside the industry. You know, the tech sector, like it's done with so many industries, has totally disrupted the music industry. It's not like any artists or any record labels that have innovated recently. It's companies like Spotify who are taking this streaming platform everywhere. And obviously a band like Greta Van Fleet have tapped into that market really, really well. They understand their demographics. I imagine they do quite a bit of market research because at the end of the day, they are a business. And whether they're serving up cheeseburgers or whether they're serving up, you know, Gordon Ramsay's Las Vegas kitchen experience or whatever, it's still a business, and there's still like, they're targeting a very narrow yet deep market because we all love Led Zeppelin, right? And to hear a band that sounds so much like them is going to turn a lot of people on. It's the same way that, you know, Hollywood works at the moment where they're, I mean, when's the last time you saw like an even vaguely original movie from Hollywood? It's all remakes, or it's Marvel Universe or DC Universe. They're all the big blockbusters. But that doesn't mean that there's not people who are making great cinema. You just have to look a little bit harder for it. And I mean, the reason I love a tool like Spotify is that it's really easy to find undiscovered bands. So there's that element there. I realize it's turned into a whole rant, sort of about the state of the industry and not about what I think of this band. But yeah, to me, it's like, I really hope they've got good people around them who are encouraging them to develop their sound and to actually bring their own character to it, because at the moment I don't hear a lot of unique character. If someone was like, hey, have you heard this Led Zeppelin B-side? It'd be like, oh, yeah, no, I never heard that one. Like, is it off a bootleg or something like that? So yeah, as a band, I don't hear a lot of like original character, whereas again, a band like Rival Sons, you know, they really have their own thing going on. It's clearly influenced by Led Zeppelin. Or a band from Australia, Sisters Dole, like they're doing the Kiss Motley Crue kind of thing. But I would never like confuse a Kiss song from 1974 with a song off the latest Sisters Dole album, because they're not imitating them like a carbon copy. Anyway, that's what I think. I'm sure a bunch of you guys out there really love them, and if you love them, that's fantastic. Like, don't be ashamed of liking music. Just because a band might get a bad review, or a bunch of people, or some idiot with long hair on YouTube is telling you that it's not his thing. If it's your thing, embrace it. Don't be cynical about music. Music is one of the last things we have on earth that we're not super cynical about. So if you enjoy them, by all means, like, you know, dig it, tell someone about it. If you don't enjoy them, there's so many other bands out there who I think you would enjoy. So, you know, use Spotify or use the internet, or go to your local record store and, you know, buy some funky old vinyl and discover some bands from the 70s you may not have heard of. And yeah, there's my like mini review of some new music, which I hope you guys will weigh in on in the comments. Weigh in on in the comments. So this is a video request to do some sort of prog metal tones. That is something I've got on the list. You know, the kind of Pliny thing, or even like Periphery, some of their cleaner things, the reverb and the delay. A lot of those bands now have almost crossed over into fusion territory. So I've definitely got a video planned on that with the Axe Effects stuff. Hopefully at some point before the end of the year. I won't make any promises, but when I get the time to like sharpen my chops so I can actually play some of that stuff, I'll definitely be putting a video up about it. Okay, so using modelers for small gigs, my experience with this, I've done plenty of small gigs using modeler, is always the scalability of different instruments. And if you're playing with a drummer, drummers can only get so quiet, meaning that it sets this like lower threshold for how quiet the gig can be. And, you know, unfortunately, a lot of sound guys have to deal with that in and out. So what they're going to do is compensate by pulling other instruments out. So a lot of the time, you know, really small gigs, you're sitting there and the drummer's bashing away and you can't hear anything anyway, because they just simply can't push the rest of the mix. But my experience when using a modeler at lower volumes, obviously, is you have these like Fletcher-Munson curves, or, you know, basically the way we perceive tone and sounds at different volumes. Not tone, you know, I should say. The way we perceive sound at different volume levels changes. So basically, all you would have to do is increase the mids. Just do that. Like, have a parametric EQ patch in your thing and just have a really nice mid bump somewhere in like the 2K range. And I found that that's going to help your guitar really poke out. It may not be the most pleasant sound when you hear it on its own, but essentially just sort of like really pushing that mid-range, pushing the guitar-centric frequencies and finding that space where you can just let it jut out in the mix is really what you're looking for. Obviously, as we decrease the volume, we're going to perceive the sound to be sort of less bright and basically duller. And everyone always then goes, oh cool, so I'll crank the bass and the treble up, essentially scooping the sound out, which when you turn it back up, sounds really like unpleasant. So my advice there would be do the opposite, push your mids. Anytime I've ever seen a guitar player in like a really small club with a mid-heavy guitar sound, I've been able to hear them, and I guess that's the most important thing, actually being able to be heard in that setting when, you know, you can only get the acoustic instruments, you know, sort of low enough. Even if you don't mic the drum kit a lot of the time, it's still, you know, the cymbals are way too loud and stuff like that, and it's just part and parcel of the territory. So yeah, push the mids, poke yourself out. Now, I definitely saw this question pop up on the channel. I didn't screenshot it, which was a mistake, but it was basically someone asking if I was going to do any videos playing and teaching ragdoll songs. So if you guys are interested in that, let me know which songs you would like me to break down. For this lick of the week though, I'll show you guys how to play the chorus for Shine, because that's my favorite song off the album. I think it's probably my favorite thing that I've ever been involved in writing. It's pretty straightforward. I'll show you the riff and we'll chuck it down over some drums, and I'll put a Dropbox link to the backing track so that you can play along. It'll just be the chorus as well. Alright, this song's pretty simple. The hardest thing you have to do is get into drop C, so the low string should be C, then you've got G, C, F, A, D, also known as, I guess, D standard with a low C string, but drop C works for what we're doing here. I'll just change the focus so that it's focused on my left hand now. Essentially, the chorus of this song is pretty straightforward. I'll play it for you really slow. Again, this is camera audio, so it might sound a bit funky. So that's pretty cool. Essentially all I'm doing is, yeah, chugging on those low 3 strings, and then we hammer on from 3rd to 5th on the low string and the 5th string like this. And then power chord at the 3rd fret. And the 5th fret there, just by laying your first finger out over those low 3 strings. So we've got this. And with the right hand, you're doing all downstrokes, and the trick there is just to get enough muting so that it sort of thickens everything up, but you don't want to be doing the full-on modern, you know, gent muting like this. It's just on the edge there where the, you know, where the strings break over the bridge. So just to tighten it up, and then at the first beat of each new chord, essentially I'm opening it up a little bit with the right hand side. So we get this. And it's more or less the same thing for the next bar, but instead of going, we go. So you get this. You can also add, with that first chord, you can play the 2nd fret of the 3rd string and the 3rd fret of the 2nd string to basically make a, you know, add more notes from that C chord. C5, I should say. Then the next section does something pretty cool. This is the King's X influence creeping in. What I'm going to do is I'll play that chord we just talked about. And I'm going to leave my ring finger in place and play a power chord at the 2nd fret. And then we're going to hit the open G with that as well. And then we're going to do the same thing, but we will move up to the 3rd fret. And we'll do a similar thing at the 5th fret, but we will put our middle finger now on the 5th fret of the G string. Oh, not the G string, the 3rd string. It's actually tuned to F at the moment. And we'll hit the open 2nd string, so it'll be a power chord on the low strings there. I'll just sort of zoom in on that one for you guys. So, barring the 5th, middle finger on the 5th of the 3rd string, and then the open B. So we get this. Which is some pretty cool sounding chords. Then we get this chord. It would be the 8th fret as a power chord with the 10th fret on the 2nd string added in there. And we're not playing the G string at all. You're just kind of using the underside of your pointer finger to mute that one. So it's... And then that top note, I'm going to change for the next chord. It's going to go to the 5th fret of the skinny string, and I'm going to play the power chord at the 5th fret. So we get... So the two chords are... And you can see there that that top note is staying constant. So this is just my way of trying to play like 2 parts at once, you know. If there was another guitar player, they would just play a part like... Well, I'm doing... But I don't have another guitar player, so I go... And then essentially the next bar is this like a hybrid of the last part of that section and the first section. So, and then up to here. And then we're going to do a slightly different chord for the next chord. It will be our 5th fret power chord, but we're going to put our ring finger on the 2nd string at the 6th fret. So like so. And we're going to hit the open E as well. You can get the open G in there if you like too. And that sounds like this. All up, we have this. And if this kind of thing interests you guys, I can do a whole lesson on the entire song in a separate video, so let me know in the comments. Until then, I'll put a link up to a backing track where you can chunk this over it in drop C. Enjoy!